Okay, thanks everybody. How y'all doing? I appreciate you being here instead of looking at robots. If I were you, that's where I would be. But you're here, so welcome. So thank you for the kind introduction. I am Ryan Germick, and I lead the Doodle Team in Mountain View, California. And I'm going to tell you all about Google Doodles, why the world needs more of them. The agenda, magic clicker somewhere. How did I go? Oh. Okay. I can dance a little bit if we need to kill some time. You guys can snap. Watch this. You can just use your arrow key. Oh, magic in the meantime. Okay, so here's the agenda. We're going to talk about my life story, because I'm sure that's very interesting to you, even though you just heard it. How to become a Google Doodler, at least how I became a Google Doodler. A little bit about Doodle history. So that's the part where you can take a nap. Yeah, some magic. Okay, here we go. The process of how we create doodles. Why the world needs more doodles, and this is mostly for my own job security. This is the presentation I gave to my boss right before I came to India, so I'll just reuse it. And then with any time left, I can do some questions and answers, all right? Sound good? All right. Okay, so my life story. So I grew up in Indiana, which is a state in the middle of the US. But you might be surprised to learn that my journey involved India more than you might think. And it's not just because I was married on an elephant. This is like a picture of me in Cochin at the Bogati Palace right after my shoes were stolen. This guy in the front row stole my shoes. So give him a round of applause for betraying me. I thought he was my friend. and he got some money for it, so he's actually a straight up crook. I grew up in a relatively rural environment. This is my backyard with a couple of my brothers when I was a kid. In cornfields, it could get kind of boring, to be honest. But my parents, pictured here, were the creative type. This is my mom and dad at a Halloween party in costumes that my mom actually put together. And of all the things that my parents taught me, this sentiment, only boring people get bored, resonates with me very well. And so as a kid, taking that mantra and internalizing it meant that if ever there was a problem, I first looked inwardly and thought, is there something I can do to improve the situation, right? I don't want to be boring. And then also it meant that we had to entertain ourselves. In the middle of the cornfields, there was, some entertaining to be had. One way I did that was draw. And my drawings, I don't think were very good because not many of them were saved. This is actually somewhat desperately a recreation of a drawing that I made. This is just a dramatization of Claus. He was a comic book character that I made when I was a little kid. He was a radioactive lab rat who had a giant hand for some reason. I don't know. This is what cartoons do to young kids. But my art career went better than my basketball career. This is actually my basketball hoop when I was a kid back in Indiana. It was in pretty shabby shape. A few years ago, I had an interview with the Hindu newspaper. Have you guys read the newspaper? Great. And they asked me why I became an artist, and I made a joke, and I said, well, it's because my professional basketball career didn't work out. But they didn't understand it as a joke, and they actually printed that I gave up my professional basketball career. So here's my ask to you. I would like to desperately plead for one of you to make me a Wikipedia page because I don't have one. And please quote this article so the world knows that I was once a professional basketball player. I knew that I'd be an artist when I was about 14 years old, and all of my Christmas presents were art-related. It was a pretty strong nudge from my family that maybe basketball wasn't my calling. And one of the most important presents was an oil painting kit from Bob Ross, who was a TV host in the U.S. He hosted a program on public television called The Joy of Painting. And it was really cool because he had, besides having this amazing Sai Baba fro, he also was very encouraging of anyone to become an artist. It wasn't something exclusive where you had to be, fancy or it was only for rich people or something. It was very democratized in the sense that anyone could be creative, and he showed all these cool tricks for how to paint a landscape, and it would be quick and very accessible. One of the highlights of my doodle career was a few years ago. I was able to create a doodle for Bob Ross in the US, and I hope that in some small way, the doodles are also a democratizing force for art and creativity and encourage people to be creative, and it's actually free. You can just look on the homepage and see it. So in high school, I lived a little bit of a double life. I was class president. This is me with my short hair, with my vice president, my secretary, and my treasurer. And although that was like, a social position or whatnot, I actually spent quite a lot of my time by myself. As a good student, I was able to make a deal with my teachers. They let me spend my computer class time in the art studio, painting studio, and they let me spend my painting studio time in the computer studio. So I basically could spend 2 hours a day teaching myself how to paint and how to use programs like Photoshop, just because I was really curious, and that's what I found most interesting. After school, after high school, as I was mentioned, I went to art school in New York, where you basically draw a lot. And this is the famous internet meme that teaches you how to draw an owl. I censored it for the good people of IIT. My Indian wife tells me that I shouldn't use swear words, so I don't use swear words. But my favorite project in college wasn't actually a drawing. It was this strange video. You might recognize the frog costume that my mom made 30 years prior. And I basically went around New York City dressed up in this frog costume, and it was a story about trying to find inner peace. It was an expression of my burgeoning interest in Eastern philosophy, religion, and mythology. This poor frog character would try to meditate. This is actually in Central Park. You can't see it so well, but this is at Strawberry Fields in Central Park, the memorial of John Lennon. And he kept being distracted by girls and guys that he would fight with. The usual stuff. I was really determined to study illustration and creative writing. That's what I wanted to do. I was a focused kid. That's what I wanted to study. But then my second year of undergraduate, there were no creative writing classes. And so, encouraged by one of my academic advisors, I took a class in Hindu mythology, and I was just blown away. The creativity of the mythology was just amazing. You had Ganesha. This is a cartoon drawing I made of Ganesha. Sorry if it's my best representation as a 20-year-old of Ganesha. And here was this god that had 4 arms and an elephant head, and you would rub his tummy for good luck, and he loved to laugh. And I thought, this is a pretty cool god. Give him that. And this is one of thousands, if not millions, of Hindu gods, and I was just blown away. It actually led me then my next year of school to study abroad in India. Does anybody know where this is? Anybody? So this is Meenakshi, a temple in Madurai. This became one of my favorite places in the world, and I stayed in Madurai for 1 year, learned Kancham Tamil. Any Tamilians? Thank you very much. I can speak my 5 words of Tamil that I remember to you after the talk. I love this place so much that I actually chose to come here and propose to my wife, who's actually also in the front row. This was the invitation card that I made for our wedding that we sent out, and the whole story is a little bit longer than this. It already is, but if you want, spoiler, she said yes to me, and we were married. Yeah. I just showed up and rode the elephant. I don't deserve any credit for this. When I arrived in India in 2000, August 2000, I came equipped with a primitive digital camera. It was a Sony FD Mavica. And the FD stood for floppy disk. That's how primitive this was. It actually took a floppy disk. And it was awesome because it was cheap to just keep reusing the disks. And at the time, this was before Skype or Google Hangouts, where calling home would have been so expensive. It would cost like $1, 60 rupees a minute or whatever, to call from an STD booth to talk to my family. So to keep in touch with family and friends, I learned to make a simple website from the photographs I was taking with this digital camera. I would upload about 10 photos a week, and I made my first ever website when I was in India. I would design it offline and go to an internet cafe and upload it. I named it the Rayanayana after the Ramayana. And I know it's a hideous looking website, but because it was my journey, right? Anyway, I know it's a hideous website, but it gave me a break. It's 14 years old. In it, I would make observations about things that I found interesting or curious, like this amazing chicken painting that was just on the side of a house somewhere in town. And sign painting actually had a huge impact on me when I went there. You know, I went with open eyes. I didn't know what I was going to get. I had never left the country before. And actually, when I first landed in Madurai, I got my first bloody nose. It was like, this I actually didn't even script this into the talk, but it freaked me out. I was like, what is this alien planet that I'm living on? My head is exploding. But everywhere I looked, there was these amazing hand-painted signs, which, you know, I found to be really fascinating. You know, there was just beauty and craft and simple things around town that, you know, didn't exist in the U.S. You know, you found it in. No, this is not a political endorsement. But you know, even on walls and in halls and on bathroom stalls, you saw these little pieces of humanity and craft and everyday occurrences, and I was instantly in love. I even saw my favorite movie star everywhere. It gets better. It gets better. And you know, I was mildly obsessed with Superstar, and I wanted to learn how to do this. So I actually found a painting guru. This is Raja. He's a painter in Madurai, and he became this is in his house with his family, and he became my teacher for a semester. And I made my own signs. This is actually my painting of Rajnikant from 14 years ago. That's the cheapest applause I could ever get. But for whoever is creating my Wikipedia page, probably several of you right now in the audience on your Wi-Fi cards, you can note that I was an old school Rajnikant fan before it was cool. Okay, so how to become a Google Doodler, at least how I became a Google Doodler, was getting back to New York from India. I had this new website making skill, and this is the year 2001, which is websites are in high demand. Everybody wants a website. And so even though I wanted to use my website skills to show off my illustrations, everybody just wanted websites. Cool. So I basically went into freelance business, making websites for people. And at that point, I learned whatever I could, whatever I needed to know, PHP, MySQL, JavaScript, whatever it took to make the websites that people were asking for. I just didn't say no, basically. And for several years, I used that as my career. And I would make a website, and it was great because I was learning all the time, and I was applying my skills, but also I was able to travel, which was really cool. Meanwhile, I was also creating my own comics and illustrations on the side, and I would basically save up enough money from creating websites, and I would be able to be anywhere in the world. I spent time in Japan and Sri Lanka and Mexico, and as long as I could get an internet connection, I could upload a website that I was working on, and I had a job. And it was a way for me to sort of satisfy my curiosity of the world and keep employed. Eventually, in 2006, a few years after I graduated school and was running my own freelance business, I decided to apply to my first full-time job. And I never thought that I would work in an office, to be honest, but I'd heard so many great things about Google that I gave it a shot. You know, I know that you all who got into IIT, getting into Google is like nothing. But I was really surprised and honored that it worked out. And I was hired to be a web specialist, which is a pretty meaningless term, I suppose. But essentially what it meant is that I went from being an illustrator who had some training in sign painting to become a sign painter for the web. Starting with about 1 million icons that I created over my first few years there. And you can see a sample of some of them you might have seen before. My most famous icon could be perhaps the poop emoticon from Gmail. Very proud of this, very proud of this. At the time, a lot of the engineers thought that adding emoticons to Gmail, especially the controversial poop emoticon, was belittling to such a serious product, but I'm happy to say that today, I could just send those engineers an email with a poop emoticon in it and end the debate. A few months ago, there was an article in Fast Company, the magazine, where I was interviewed about the process, just about the poop emoticon. And I pleasantly learned that this was the first application of the poop emoticon in the United States. So that's another part of my legacy that you can reference in my new Wikipedia page. Probably the first big project that I got involved in, it was mentioned earlier, was the Pegman for Street View. So if you've used Street View, it basically is this little orange guy you can drag on to the Google map and get this sort of 360-degree example of a street corner. It's really useful for a lot of things. But it was a new technology, and they didn't have any idea how to market it. You can actually see some of the variations we created, and you might recognize another frog here, sort of reoccurring theme for me. But there's a bunch of different Easter eggs that we created to make little fun things. Like, so if you went to Berkeley, which is a famous hippie town, you would get this, the Pegman would turn into a hippie and things like that. BuzzFeed wrote an article that called it Google's Weird Art Project Hidden in Plain Sight. A really fascinating part of the process was being involved in marketing the product. I was invited to the marketing meeting even though I had no prior marketing experience. And to be honest, I was pretty bored in the meeting. They were talking about demographics and market positioning and all this stuff. And I was just doodling on the side of my notebook, thinking that none of the ideas that I was hearing was very, very interesting. And then when the room got quiet, I said, well, what if we just dress up the product manager in a suit that looks like the Pegman and have him in the video showing how the product works? It'd be like kind of stupid, basically. And to me, that was funny. I just purely thought it'd be good for a laugh. And much to my surprise, they agreed. And I had an hour to make a storyboard, and then they hired a company in Los Angeles to build the costume. I saw the script they were working on, and they basically cut out all my jokes from the storyboard, but I was really excited that it was happening. A couple weeks before the video shoot, I got a suspicious instant message. Hey, Ryan, how tall are you? About 6 feet? And I said, yeah. How much do you weigh? About 180? Yeah. And they're like, do you mind being a stand-in for the video shoot, while Steven's busy? I was like, yeah, sure. I figured, whatever, I'll just be in the suit, not on camera. They won't see me. But then actually, when I was in the car on the way to the studio, I learned the script changed, and I was supposed to be the sole star of the video. As the web specialist, again, means nothing. This is, and actually 13 million views later, this became Google's first viral video. It got me enough internet fame that when I was in Japan the next time, I saw an illustration of myself in a tech magazine. And I got the wonderful compliment of low tech, nice taste. That's the favorite compliment I think I've ever gotten. Okay, so that's enough about me. Let's talk a little bit about Doodles. And this is a team that creates the Doodles. Last year, they created over 400 Doodles. We launched over 400 Doodles. More than 100 of them were animated and 20 of them were interactive. So this team of artists and engineers and producers and a few dogs are really busy. I want to tell you a little bit of how we got from the kind of basic clip art that we started with to where we are today. And to do that, we want to go back in time a bit to think about where the internet was in 1998. Okay? So this is Yahoo back in the day. And if I wanted to go search for the weather in Bombay, I would be greeted with a page with 270 words on it. With tons of things pulling for my attention. If I went to Lycos, it'd be 239 words, and not much better on Alta Vista, which was 229 words. When you get to Google, this looked like it was still part of, just got out of Stanford actually at that point. You only had 37 words. Much simpler, much cleaner, with this very inviting logo. And on that page, 7 of those words were actually Google. A little self-obsessed maybe. But that's okay. This was the early logo, this puffy, multicolored, childlike, very inviting thing. It was very friendly. And then one fateful day in August, when the founders of the company were going off to this hippie festival in the middle of the Nevada desert called Burning Man, they changed the logo ever so slightly to indicate as a kind of out-of-office message that they'd be away. This was the first Doodle. Interestingly, it came a full week before they even bothered to incorporate the company. That's how part of the DNA Doodles are at Google. Over the next year or so, things didn't get that much more advanced. They really kind of stayed in sort of a clip art world. This is the Thanksgiving turkey for 1998. And you'll notice that a year later, even though the logo changed, they actually use the exact same clip art for Thanksgiving. Cost savings back in the day, I suppose. And for years, this is a Chinese New Year doodle from a few years later, things stayed relatively simple. But users really responded very well to having these acknowledgments on the homepage of special holidays and celebrations. And it really resonated with users. Eventually, the artwork this is a bit dark, but it got quite a bit more sophisticated. And a team of professional illustrators, including myself, were hired to make Doodles to the next level. This actually, Rembrandt painting was a real painting. It wasn't a digital reproduction of Photoshop or anything. And you can see some of the test paintings that Jennifer Hom made to create the doodle. By now, we've created over 2,500 Google Doodles. And here's a few of the favorite ones from India that celebrate things from comic books. This is a knot pie from Amar Chitrakatha. Filmmakers, film stars, technological breakthroughs. Congratulations on this one. Musicians, mathematicians. But at a certain point, we realized that it didn't just have to be pretty pictures, and we can also do, some animation and interactivity. So this was a doodle for India's Independence Day in 2010, inspired by the chalk paintings. Inspired by the chalk paintings that I would see outside of doorsteps in Madurai. I should give credit to my wife. The animation was her idea. And so what we found is that, on the internet, you didn't just have to have one picture or one logo. You could have many logos, but also it didn't just have to be a static image. You could have animation. And a big breakthrough came in the form of some posters hanging above a colleague's desk in the Googleplex in Mountain View. So these are actually old posters from Atari video games from like the early 80s. And the person who had them up above their desk was a Polish man named Marcin Makary, who became a close friend. And we bonded over how beautiful these posters were for these early video games and how crappy the actual video games were. I mean, talk about an oversell, right? So we decided to make our own crappy video game. And this was the very first prototype we made. This was made the same day that I mentioned this idea to Marcin. Can anybody guess what it is? Right. So here's actually the next prototype. This was the prototype that we made, and I actually flew to Japan to talk to Namco, who owns the rights to Pac-Man, to convince him to let us create this doodle. And let me just make sure the volume's off. And this is the actual final doodle that we launched. How many people played the Google Pac-Man doodle? Wow. So the game was played actually hundreds of millions of times in the time that it was launched, and actually was given credit by an external source for losing 756 crore rupees worth of office productivity around the world. And it was named by the Guinness Book of World Records as the most expensive game of Pac-Man in the history of the world. Yeah. Another honor. So how do we do this? How do we make all these things? Well, to be honest, we're actually making it up as we go along. There's no rule book for how to create doodles, but I want to share some of the things that we've learned so far and some of the advice that has been shared with me, and also take you through a few projects step by step. Okay, cool. So we begin with our principles. These have been forged over the course of 16 years, where we try to create something that expresses Google's values and is like a gift to the user. We get over 1,000 requests a year, and when we get the submissions, we basically match them up with our principles and say, is this something that feels right for the company to be doing? After we review them, we always have local experts. So whether it's India or South Africa or Israel or Japan, we have somebody inside of the company at Google who becomes like a cultural consultant for us to try to get the details right. And then we start the art process. So even a simple illustration has at least 10 distinct steps in making it happen. This was a doodle for Ada Lovelace, a famous early prototypical computer scientist from England. And you can see that there were many versions of this doodle before the one that you saw that went live. It's a pretty democratic team. I lead the team, but everyone's basically their own art director. And it's up to them to make the best piece of art or animation that they can. But as a team, we meet regularly every week, and we have a creative review. And there's a principle that I like to enforce in the creative review, which is to give feedback that is RAD. Okay? A little corny, I know. But RAD stands for three things. Respectful. So first of all, when you give feedback, you want to be, you don't want to be a jerk, right? You want to just be, you want to think of, you want to consider the person's feelings. You don't want to be rude. So that's important. You want it to be actionable. So you don't want to just say that you like something or you don't like something. You want to give feedback to try to give, with constructive criticism, to make something better. And you want it to be direct in the sense that you don't have to beat around the bush. This is a group of mature professionals, and you can talk to them with a straight shooting attitude to help them get to wherever they're trying to go with their artwork. Flaws. Oh, great. And So here's some advice that I've absorbed over the years. This comes from Tina Fey. Does anybody know Tina Fey? She's an awesome comedian. Yeah, she's great. She was the head writer for Saturday Night Live for many years, the American comedy show. And then also she was a creator of a program called 30 Rock, which is hilarious if you can watch it. It's one of my favorite shows. And as she became a boss for all these creative people, she made this amazing insight, which is that in most cases, being a good boss means hiring talented people and getting out of their way. And I think this is very wise advice. And this was never truer than when we worked on a doodle for the 40th anniversary of DC Comics, Batman and all these guys. And for that, we hired Jim Lee, who actually is an artist who's been for decades drawing some of the world's most beloved comics characters and is actually now the executive publisher of DC Comics. So I obviously had no business telling this guy what to do. As the drafts of his artwork evolved, there wasn't a whole lot I could contribute that's tell him, give him some advice on how, Batman should be shaped, right? This guy knows what he's doing. But one thing I could say is that, this is close to final. I could say, hey, yeah, this is awesome. I could tell Jim, I could say, hey, you know what? Actually, the Google logo goes blue, red, yellow, blue. So if you could just swap Wonder Woman's invisible plane colors, that would be fantastic. And this is the final that we came up with. All right. Another really great piece of advice came from the silent half of the musician duo Penn and Teller. So he's a guy that doesn't talk, but he wrote a really great article about the secrets of magic. And what he said was that you want to make the secret something that's so much trouble that it seems more than the trick is worth, which I think is really amazing advice. He actually gave a story where they had a trick where they went on a TV show and they put 500 cockroaches in a top hat. And it looked like magic, but basically they just did the disgusting work of packing 5,000 cockroaches in a top hat. And they had specially trained cockroaches that don't run away from light. It was amazing. In our case, I could think of an example of this being the Moog synthesizer doodle that we created a few years back to celebrate the birthday of Robert Moog, who was an early music pioneer, or electronic music pioneer. This doodle had 23 knobs, 24 keys, and a fully functional 4-track recording system where you could share your music with your friends. And it was only up for 24 hours. It took 5 engineers almost 4 months to create, and it was one of our, by far, most complicated doodles. It started with this prototype where I created this on the Google Shuttle, the famous Google Shuttle, just to give a proof of concept to an engineer to see if he'd be willing to work on it. And over time, it expanded to where we could have this sharing mechanism. We thought about putting some kind of oscillator effect, maybe making it more colorful. Over time, we refined it a little bit and simplified and continued to refine. And then this is what we launched on the day. In the 24 hours that it was live, it had more than 74 years of music and weird sounds created and shared on the internet. The first prototype didn't look anything like the final version. It was actually just this HTML page that tested out the Chrome's capability with the web audio API. This is a little snippet of the JavaScript. Technical crowd thought you would appreciate this, where we wrote an entire synthesizer engine to make all the noises that you heard on your desktop browser. And you can actually check it out. The whole project was open source, and you can go online and you can get the source code and play around with it. One thing that a lot of people don't know is that at this time, the web audio API was only available in Google Chrome and only available for a few weeks. As we were developing this thing for months, we didn't even know if this would go launch into stable Chrome. And all the other browsers, Internet Explorer, Firefox, Safari, didn't have this capability yet. They didn't have this web standard enacted. So we actually created a second version in Flash for everyone else's browser. The reaction was awesome. In Japan alone, 4 of the top trending topics on Twitter were about the Moog Doodle. I read a little bit of Japanese so you can see, for instance, Moogu. The synth-loving band Depeche Mode used it in their studio and tweeted and posted about it on Facebook. And NPR, a news organization in the U.S., called it the best doodle ever, which was flattering to me. The last piece of advice that I want to give that I've sort of stolen from other people is from one of my favorite directors, Quentin Tarantino. And he was actually quoting another director, one of his favorite directors, Terry Gilliam. And he talked about what it meant to be a director. And he said that it's not your job as a director to be able to design costumes and fix the lights and run the cameras. It's really just your job to explain your vision. And he said once he heard that, all of a sudden the whole process of directing was demystified. And he thought, hey, I like to talk. I can explain my vision. I'm good at that. And so I took that advice to heart when I directed Google's first live-action doodle, which was for Charlie Chaplin. These are some of the storyboard drawings that I made to explain my vision to my team. And actually, all the actors cast in the video were illustrators. These are from some of the illustrators that were in the video, including our Charlie Chaplin. I cast myself as the cop, being the authority figure and all. And we strived really hard for authenticity in the video. So we watched countless videos and films of Charlie Chaplin, read books. We also consulted with the Silent Film Museum and found locations that we shot in locations that Charlie Chaplin actually had filmed movies at 90 years prior. Actually not too far from the Google headquarters in Northern California. One thing that was really rewarding was in some of the YouTube comments, people noticed some of the details. Like this YouTube commenter who said, noticed that the fake newspaper that we had a joke in it that said, "These talkie films are just a fad." But what the users probably didn't know is that that entire newspaper was designed to have fake headlines just in case for one frame, there was a shot of one of these headlines. Okay, so as I'm getting closer to wrapping up, I want to give a plea to you on why the world needs more Google Doodles. What do I mean when I say Google Doodles? Well, I don't actually mean you have to change your company's logo, okay? So actually, this is a page from Google's patent for Google Doodles, and I'm not threatening anyone here, but I will say that Google has considerable legal resources, and you don't have to go and do exactly what they're doing. But the idea of Doodles really, in my mind, is just the idea of considering opportunities to delight users of whatever product or service you're building. So I was talking to somebody backstage, and he was talking about how he wants to build, I don't want to give the exact IP away, but he has a cool idea for how to make money with mobile phones, right? And in that product and service that he wants to build, there are definitely going to be opportunities to make something fun happen to consider the user's feelings. And then, so when we talk about Doodles, I want you to think about how when you're building a service, all you tech geniuses out there, and when you're building a product, how can you actually make that happen with what you're doing? Doodles aren't the only thing that we do at Google in this regard, and actually I've been involved in it with a lot of projects to bring user delight. So this is one example where on Halloween time, if you were to search for a werewolf, you'd get a fake knowledge panel that talked about real-life werewolves and their habits. And we did some dozen monsters that you could learn about as if they were real entities. We also had, for Christmas last year, you could have a search for Christmas caroling, and then you can have this little karaoke app in your mobile phone where you can go and sing from door to door and play music. And then you guys might remember Google Knows that came out on April Fool's Day. So I led this project as well, where we basically tricked many of you into thinking that you could smell your computers. We had a nice video in there. And it was just an opportunity to basically do something fun for users. And before Google sold Motorola, I was also involved with creating the animations that would start in the phone boot up screen that would change once in a while, just to give a little extra love, to the people who bought the phone. So I want to sort of rephrase this and say, not necessarily that the world needs more Google Doodles, we're doing okay, but the world needs more user delight. And I want to give you some reasons why. So first of all, this might be an unpopular opinion at a tech festival, and I know the robots are pretty cool, but robots can't do everything, okay? In the sort of data assessed tech world, even at Google, where everything gets reduced to numbers, there's really no replacing the human touch. You might remember Robocop. Things go badly, let me just say that. When you're making something with user delight, it's my opinion that having a personality is more important than being a personality. So you might remember Clippy, the well-intended but ill-fated assistant in Microsoft Word who would kind of harass you when you're trying to write a letter. And so that actually could have been a pretty cool feature, but the problem was when Clippy says, "Hey, it looks like you're trying to write a letter, can I help you?" And you say, "Yeah, like should I say dear grandma or what's up grandma?" It didn't understand what the heck you're talking about. And so that's the problem with natural language. And presenting yourself as a personality, people are over-promised and under-delivered. Google took a different approach with Doodles. And literally in the first Doodle, we put a person behind the logo. And although that might be a bit of a semantic coincidence, I think it's really the principle in the sense that we've been using for the last 16 years. The idea is that Google is a company full of individuals with passions and interests, and we want to express those and share those with our users. One example of that is the Sochi Olympics Doodle that we made in February of last year. So Google, as a culture, and us as a team, we felt really concerned with the way that the LGBT community was being treated in Russia. There's, laws being enacted, horrible things happening to them. And so we made this doodle with pride flag colors to support the LGBT community around the world. And we put it next to a quote from the Olympics charter that was talking about anti-discrimination. And we wanted to call it the hypocrisy of cooperating with the Russian Olympics in a time where the LGBT community was being discriminated against. I'm also proud to say that this year, in 2014, last year, was the first time that we were able to celebrate an even number, actually slightly more women than we did men, to promote gender balance and, basically, from all walks of life, show the amazing contributions that people have made. This is Shankantala Devi, the Indian math whiz, and we're really glad to sort of, evolve our tradition to make sure that we're not just perpetuating a cycle where only men are getting credit for amazing things that happen in the world. Okay, so another thing that I think is important to consider about this day and age is that technology is getting more personal than ever, and that's just a fact. Think about the supercomputer that's in your pocket. It's on 24 hours a day. You don't share with anybody. Maybe you stood in line to buy it for a night. Who knows? You keep it in your pocket, and you hold it up close to your phone, and you stroke it. You spend more time with it than you spend with your significant other. Social scientists call this idea mobile affinity, right? And when you have a device that's this personal and this part of your life, it's even more important to give it some life. And you have an opportunity, if you're developing products or services for mobile devices, to really consider, how that is going to transpire with your users. So in that sense, psychology matters, right? You're building a tool and you have an opportunity to position it with your users, where it could actually be a helpful service that is always ready for you, or it could be something that makes you feel small and intimidated. Right? And that, when we create Doodles or these other user delight initiatives, we're thinking about how the power dynamic is with the user and how it can make them feel good. Everybody likes presents. So when you have an opportunity to give them a gift, whether it's a silly logo or an animation, think about how the little things matter. This is the Oscar Mayer Wienermobile. I don't know if any of you have had the pleasure to see it. It is a car shaped like a hot dog. And that is to say that fun can be functional. You can drive this thing around. Google has a famous list, 10 things we know to be true. Okay? The number one thing on the list is to focus on your user and all things will follow. And I totally agree with this. And one of the best ways that I learned about this recently is by getting a puppy. Okay? When we were kids, we had a dog and we get frustrated that it didn't understand English. Be like, Benson, sit. Benson, go fetch my newspaper. Benson, change the channel. He didn't get these things. When I got a new puppy, I was loaned this wonderful book which talked about how when you're training a dog, you can empathize from the dog's point of view. You can think about the incentives that would encourage the dog to understand why it's in its best interest to sit and get the newspaper. I don't think it can quite change channels, but you get the idea. It's not that different when you're designing a product. You think about who's going to use this product, who's going to use this service, how can I make it something that gives them an incentive to come back? Now, obviously, with Doodles, the incentive is pretty clear. You make something cool on the homepage, people come to check it out. When they come to check out the homepage, they're more likely to search. But that application can be used in a much more broad context. I'd also maintain that fun is like its own food group. Again, we're at a place that is, a best in the world institution for technology, for rational thought, for mathematics, for science, and that's fantastic. But that's not all there is to life, right? Someone asked me backstage what I think is lacking in the Indian education system. I'm not an expert in the Indian education system, but I will say that it's important to have a good balance of not just hard sciences, but also soft sciences, liberal arts, things that enrich the world. Maybe it's a bit oversimplification, but, the rational mind is only part of the equation, right? What about poetry? What about music? What about art? What about painting, dancing? Things like that. Someone also asked me, what it takes to get hired at Google. And of course, being an IIT is a great thing, being a topper in your class, having this amazing resume, building a great, piece of technology, but also being interesting, having something to say, having hobbies, having curiosity and things like that. That is also to say that if you do these things, if you think about user delight, if you think about ways that you can consider the psychology, if you think about fun as a food group, you can actually help build a more human future. At the end of the day, what are we working for besides to make the world a better place for our fellow man and womankind? And it might even be that you create something that's long-lasting, and with your bare hands, you build something that people see for years to come, stands the test of time. But at the very least, you might be able to make a sign, paint something with your hand that people can enjoy as individuals. And with that, I thank you for your time. That's my presentation. So happy to hear any questions or anything like that. Good sir in the back. Oh, yeah, if you, I can repeat your question or if you want to pass around the mic, it's all good. Oh, so you said everything's seen by lots of people. How do we know that it's going to be well received? Yeah. So I mean, the question was, things are seen by millions of people. How do you make sure it's well done? Oh, we don't know. I mean, all we can do is our best, and we have a team of professional artists and engineers, and we trust each other, and we basically put up our work, and we try to encourage each other to make the best possible thing. We also have, like I mentioned, we have these idea of cultural consultants inside of Google to get details right. But that's another thing. With math, you can be right. 1 + 1 = 2. With art, it's ambiguous and it's subjective. So all we can do is make an editorial decision and say this is what we think is best. And although there's no certainty, we take a risk and we put it out in the world and hope for the best. And what we found overwhelmingly is that the reaction is very positive. And in this day and age where things are perfectly designed and things are so rational, it's rare that you encounter something that's just purely done subjectively and artistically. And I think it's really wonderful that Google has this tradition of using its most valuable real estate to make a statement like that. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, next question from here.
Yes.
Yeah. Around 4 to 5 months ago, Google in its logo shifted L by 1 pixels in the right side. What was the reason for that? Actually, I found a lot, I searched a lot on web that what is the reason for that, but I didn't found it anywhere.
Sure. Yeah. So I was not part of that bold decision. I was not consulted. But no, I think there's, Google is constantly tweaking its algorithms, constantly testing out new user interfaces. And I think that extends to the logo too, where they're constantly trying to make everything a little bit better. I mean, I know that not so long ago, they also changed the logo to be more of a flat design. And the idea there was just to, evolve and to slowly modernize the design. And, I'm sure that there's some genius designer inside of Google who every time they open the homepage, got white knuckle anxiety because that 1 pixel is wrong. And so finally, after probably 20 hours of presentations, they got their dream came true.
Good afternoon, sir. So I have 2 questions to ask.
You only get one. Sorry. Had to pick one. Just kidding.
Okay. Number 1, that I've heard a lot about Google that the working environment is great and you get free food. You can even sleep there. You can sleep there and you get excellent things. But I also want to ask, is the working environment hectic in terms of meeting the deadlines and doing certain things? And question number 2 is, how did you fall in love with your wife?
Wow. So you asked me if my marriage is hectic, and does my wife cook free food? Was that it? Working conditions at Google are pretty good, and actually my wife works at Google too. So they did not assign me a wife, but that's one benefit they don't yet have. No, Google is, I think, has a pretty enlightened viewpoint of how to treat employees, but they're not giving anything away for free, in the sense that all the amenities at Google are really built to make you more productive, and they try to create a system where you don't spend time on things that are keeping you from doing your work productively. So I'll give you an example for free food. The cost to Google to give an engineer a meal is so much, right? But then the cost of having an engineer leave campus for an hour to go to lunch, to spend their own money, to get stuck in traffic, to be in a situation where they can't speak freely with their colleagues, where it takes them more time to get back. There's almost 15,000 people on the Mountain View campus. If they send 15,000 people out to lunch, it'd be traffic jams all over town. So Google looks at the numbers and says, hey, if we just serve food here, not only can we give food that's healthier and going to keep the employees happy and in better shape, we're also going to avoid a traffic jam. We're going to get more productivity out of our workers. It's just actually a way that might seem counterintuitive, but it's actually quite clever with how to create a positive working environment. I think, it's obviously something that seems impressive from the outside. And so it's actually a good PR strategy, right? and you have visitors that come and get a meal at Google, have a good meal and think positively about Google, and some of the smart folks that visit might consider applying, which is a good thing for Google too. So I think that's Google's really smart that way, and I'm very fortunate. I'm very glad to have that. But I'm also aware that Google's a clever company. The second part, how I fell in love with my wife. She has many wonderful qualities. I think one of my favorite things about her was actually she introduced me to Vipassana meditation. And the idea being that you could have equanimity for the ups and downs in life. And I actually really like that. I figured if you're going to be married to somebody, it's going to be a long haul. And you're going to need to be able to be calm and take the ups as well as the downs. And she's also, not a good cook, unfortunately, but wonderful lady. You should meet her after the talk.
We can take one more question after that. Anyone from IDC or design? Yeah.
I can stay longer if you want me to stay longer, unless you're going to run out of tape.
Reference, sir. I still remember during London Olympic Doodles, people were spending good amount of time just playing Doodles. So did you receive complaint from analytics team that your Google Doodles are so awesome that people are just spending 20 minutes and they are bouncing back from the homepage of Google?
So I think the Olympics Doodles were played some billion times in the few days that they were up. But like I mentioned before, one thing that's kind of funny is that at Google, everything is measured, to the nth degree, right? Every single pixel is analyzed. We shift the logo L one letter or one pixel. But Doodles don't have the same kind of scrutiny. And it's actually a really wonderful opportunity that we just put something out there that's fun and we let the world enjoy it. And then it comes down the next day and we don't care so much about the numbers. It's really just purely a gift that doesn't have those kind of market constraints. As far as outside people getting upset about it, hey, let's be honest. At work, instead of playing the running game on Google, you'll probably be on Facebook anyway. Next question.
Hi, Ryan. I love the FIFA 2014 Doodles a lot. My question to you is, considering the kind of wearables Google is coming up with, like the LG Gear or the Google Glass,
Sure.
do you think Google Doodle has a future to it, like considering the wearables?
That's a good question. So with wearables and different form factors, do Doodles have a future? I think that in some ways it's challenging, right? Because you have a smaller screen if you have Google Glass or a little watch, so you don't have as expansive of a canvas as you might on a desktop computer, even a mobile phone. But the principles of user delight still apply, right? If you're interacting with something, there's a chance to consider the psychology, and there's a chance to put something wonderful in there that's like a gift to the user. So I'm not so concerned about, does it specifically say the letters Google on it? But is it as an opportunity to design something that has a human touch? And I think in that sense, yes, there will be a human touch.
Hello, sir.
Hi.
Hope you saw so many sculptures and artworks of the Madurai.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. So is there any way to get it in future via Google Doodle for them?
In Madurai.
Not Madurai. There are so many artworks and sculpture works in Tamil Nadu.
Yeah.
Made by so many kings.
That'd be great. We're always looking for ideas. So, yeah, I mean, definitely the architecture and the design of India and Tamil Nadu have been an inspiration. So, I don't know, maybe in one of the Indian Independence Day Doodles or Republic Day, maybe we'll feature some things like that. Good idea. Thank you.
Good evening, sir.
Hello. Good
I
evening.
would like to ask the. Sorry for
It's 1:00.
Good afternoon, sir.
There you go.
I would like to ask about the quintessential Google logo that pops up everywhere and every Google service. What was the idea and the philosophy behind it?
Well, I was still in high school when I was designed, I think. But I think it's meant to be very approachable and a little bit silly. Like the word Google itself is a little bit fun to say, right? And now it's a big company, but back then it was just sort of you probably know that Google was actually a misspelling. So Google, as it's spelled, was supposed to be the mathematical number Google, like 1 with 100 zeros. But as far as the logo design, I think it was meant to be something that had a little bit of a childlike fun to it. And it's I feel really fortunate because the founders themselves, have a sense of fun, and they I think they have an innate understanding of how technology can improve people's lives, not just from a data standpoint, but also in a way that also considers their humanity. And so I think that's an extension of that philosophy.
So, just one other question.
Sure.
It seems that in all logos of Google products, there seem to be 4 colors hanging around. Was that your contribution or from the start?
That was there long before my time. Yeah. Okay, we'll do it. Okay, go for it. Entrepreneur. No, there's. You can just yell it to the heavens. Sure. The T-Rex. Oh, what's that? So there's a cult. I mean, so my team works on some of those things, but there's a culture at Google where there should, where you can have this kind of fun. I mean, one of the ways I mentioned the food not just being, charity, but actually, something that's part of the culture and is meant to keep people productive. And also, I mean, you have engineers working on these products and designers working on them for months and for years. And when they have an idea, it keeps them interested to have something fun and connect with users in a more fun way. So really, there's a culture where anybody can contribute. And if there's something seems fun and you can slip it in through code review, then you can make it happen. Yeah. Sure. Okay. Sure. Okay. After I'll be happy to see. Yeah. Of course, because you're from the media as well, apparently, judging on your seat. Okay.
Can you share your motivation of delighting people?
Sure. So I think I have a prepared answer for you in my mind. So it actually was multi-step for me. I think first thing was I'm a middle child, 5 kids in my family. So first, I probably got into this business because I'm desperate for attention. I don't think it's a secret or a coincidence that I ended up in a job where millions of people see everything I do. The second thing was, it's personally gratifying to me. It's fun. Like I love to make something that solves a visual problem or entertains someone or tells a story. I really enjoy it. Third reason is I couldn't believe that Google would let me do this big company, and I can do something as silly as a poop icon. I actually get a lot of just, enjoyment from something that, iconoclastic. And the fact that I could do that and be rewarded is amazing. I'm really happy about that. But then at a certain point, I realized that maybe from a more mature sense, that creating opportunities for user delight actually has some non-trivial impact on people. So being able to celebrate the Sochi Olympics, for instance, was something I felt really, and I have a sticker on my laptop to prove it, I felt very proud of. I was very happy that Google could make a statement to support, people that were discriminated against around the world. Celebrating someone like Ada Lovelace, who was a kind of an unsung hero of computer science, meant that I could help with my little corner of the internet shine a light on something that I think was really worthwhile. So I actually felt almost like this sort of personal, almost spiritual motivation to use my canvas to make a statement that's positive for the world. And then now as I'm getting older and thinking about having a family and things, like the 5th reason why I care about user delight is it actually makes good business sense. It's actually a sound strategic move for my career. Like I've seen the results of why it's a positive thing to do this. And not only do I enjoy it, not only do I find a sense of fulfillment for it, not only do I feel like it's, good for the world, also I think, it means that I'll have a job for a while. Yeah.
Hello, sir.
Hello.
Sir, I want to ask that being at such a great position, and then there might be some hard times also.
Sure.
And how you handle things at that time, and what keeps you going?
So I remember thank you for the question. How do you handle hard times? I remember a really tough time when I went to the kitchen at Google and there were no more fresh strawberries. It's true. It's true. Yeah. And so in that time, when I was making my cereal, I just used honey instead of strawberries. And I made it through. Yeah, so. No, yeah. No,
So
but,
he-
no, but I mean, in all seriousness, another question was asked about, is the job hard? Is it deadlines and stuff? And we do work really hard. I work 10, 12 hours a day easily. This is technically my vacation, and I'm here. So I care about what I do and I work hard. But I'm grateful to have a supportive team. I work with really talented, smart people. If I run into a challenge, I can often consult my team or my boss or my wife. They give me really great advice. And at the end of the day, I also realize that life comes first. If I work really hard to make my deadlines to do the best possible project, but if my family needs me, if my health needs me, then I have to be ruthless with my prioritization. And make a decision to scale back, to postpone. Ultimately, I feel like I'm in a very fortunate and privileged position, and I try not to lose sight of that.
Yeah. So as we guys are running out of time, we can take just one more question. Other questions you can get cleared after this lecture. So this is the last one.
Hello, can you please brief us a little bit more about your research part? You just
Sure.
Google it out, or you have any other process?
Yeah, Google is a very helpful tool for sure. It really depends on the project. So it could be anything from looking up images for reference material to reading a book to watching a movie. We did a doodle for the sculptor Rodin, and actually in Stanford campus near to Google, there is a sculpture garden full of his sculptures. And so the artist, British chap by the name of Matthew Cruikshank, went and sketched from life the drawings, the sculptures, to get an idea of them. When we did the Doodles for World Cup in Brazil, actually a part of the team went to Brazil and we spent a week in Brazil learning about the culture and visiting the tourist spots. I know, hard job, right? And then actually got to be in Brazil during the World Cup, attend games, and just be part of the frenzy that was there to get as much authenticity as possible. And so it really depends on the project. It could be consulting a scientific expert. So we did a doodle once about holograms, and I remember consulting an expert on holograms. We did a doodle about, I mentioned Ada Lovelace, there was one author for a book. So we had the author come to Google and we did an interview with them. I remember doing a doodle for the keyboard doodle for Robert Moog, and we actually consulted with his daughter about the project. And one of the best compliments I've ever got was when we're working on the doodle, I was on the telephone with Robert Moog's daughter, Michelle, a lovely woman, who actually now runs a foundation to teach children about science through music technology. And we were trying to arrange a video chat. So I was talking to her, getting her to set up Google Hangouts. And while she was setting it up, I was just sort of aimlessly playing with the doodle. And before she ever saw it, she heard the noises that the doodle was making. And she said, "Oh, that sounds like my childhood." And it was so cool because here's a person who grew up, whose life is as authentically as possible connected to this thing, and she's giving me this guidance that this is what it sounds like. So again, it depends greatly on the project, but we do take great lengths to try to make something that is a doorway into curiosity for this topic in the most authentic way possible in the time that we have to do it. Okay. Anybody want to sneak one last question in? What's that? The test light. The typeface is the test light. That was the question. Thank you, typography nerd.
Right. Thank you so much, sir, for spending your valuable time with us and enlightening us with such a wonderful lecture. I would now like to invite Professor B.K. Chakravarti to felicitate sir with a memento and a token of thanks.
Oh.
Sorry.
Creative destruction.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Excellent. I had the design school here.
Oh, great.
And your lecture was fabulous. One of the best lectures
for
the whole of last year.
Thank you so much.
and this is a small moment.
Oh,
Techfest team.
thank you so much.
Welcome.
Thank you.
We invite you for the design show.
Yeah, I'll be happy to see it.
Looking forward to see you.
Happy to see it.
Yeah.
Thank you
I'd
so
like
much.
to invite your better half here onto the stage.
Ah.
Say hello to everybody. Yeah.
This is Ananthika Hari Singh. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, sir.